The grand atrium of the Veilspire Citadel seemed carved from twilight itself. Towering arches of translucent crystal caught the last violet rays filtering through the dome's ceiling, bending them into slow, mournful pulses that washed over the assembled thousands. No banners fluttered. No horns sounded. The only sound was the soft, collective susurration of breathing, perfectly measured, perfectly restrained, rising from row upon row of Ascendant Veiled standing in absolute formation. Their compound eyes gleamed like polished obsidian under the dim bioluminescence, mandibles locked in an expression that could have been serenity or sorrow, impossible for a human to read. I stood near the rear wall, shoulders squared in my stiff diplomatic blacks, the silver pin of the Terran concordance glinting faintly at my collar. My name was Elias Marrow, Junior Cultural Liaison, barely 29 cycles old, assigned to the Veil homeworld for 6 standard months and still struggling to tell the difference between their gestures of respect and gestures of farewell. The summons had arrived 40 hours earlier in a sealed resin capsule. Attendance at the Assumption of the Eternal Veil is required. Protocol grade, Sovereign. No elaboration. No attachments. Just those 5 words and the royal sigil that made refusal unthinkable. I had assumed, gods forgive me, I had assumed this was their version of a coronation. On Earth we shouted, wept, threw confetti when power changed hands. Perhaps the Veiled simply did ceremony with more gravity. The darkened hall, the utter stillness, the funereal hush, I told myself it was cultural restraint, not grief. So I kept my face neutral, hands clasped behind my back military style, and waited for the moment the new sovereign would step onto the central dais and the silence would finally break into whatever passed for joy among a species that measured emotion in fractions of a millimeter. Then the procession entered. 6 honor guards, each almost 3 meters of sculpted chitin and ceremonial plating, emerged from the shadowed eastern archway bearing a low bier of star-frosted crystal. On it lay a slender, shrouded form no larger than a human adolescent. Gossamer veils, pale as frost, draped the body, the upper pair of arms crossed in final repose over the thorax, the lower pair trailing limply at the sides. A fading crown of woven photon silk rested on the brow, its once brilliant threads already dulling to the color of spent ash. The air left my lungs in a slow, horrified leak. This was not an ascension. This was interment. The bier was set with exquisite care at the foot of the dais steps. The guards withdrew to form an impassive ring. A single figure then approached from the opposite archway. She was small. Far too small to carry what was coming. Reall Vexthera, 11th daughter of the late sovereign the Lyra, barely past her 3rd molt. Her carapace still shimmered with the faint adolescent iridescence that would fade only with age and grief. Her gait lacked the glacial certainty of the elders around her. She wore the plain white shroud of the heir-elect, no armor, no jewels, only thin fabric already darkening at the edges where internal fluids of mourning had begun to seep through the weave. Her 6 compound eyes were locked on the shrouded form ahead. She did not blink. None of them ever blinked. But the light fractured differently across her lenses, tiny, trembling refractions that spoke of tears no human eye could see. She reached the bier. Stopped. One delicate upper hand lifted, hovered, then descended to brush the veil over what had once been her mother's face. The touch was feather-light, reverent, yet it seemed to cost her something vital. Slowly she sank to her lower knees before the crystal slab and bowed until her brow touched the cold surface. The hall remained a tomb. No one moved to comfort her. No one spoke. The veiled philosophy of sorrow was absolute. To voice grief was to profane it. To display it was to diminish the departed. So they stood, an entire species turned to statues, while their child sovereign knelt alone before her mother's corpse and inherited an empire in perfect, agonizing silence. Something cracked inside my chest. It started as heat behind my sternum, then became pressure, then became an unbearable, living thing clawing up my throat. Pity. Horror. A furious, helpless recognition. I knew that posture. I had warded myself 3 years earlier beside a hospital bed on New Shanghai when the monitors flatlined and the nurses politely pretended not to notice my shaking shoulders. I remembered how the silence had felt like violence, how no one had dared say the word dead aloud, as though naming it would make the wound deeper. And here was a girl, no, a sovereign, forced to swallow the same silence on a planetary scale. My feet moved before my brain caught up. The crowd did not part so much as freeze around me. I walked between them like a blade through still water, mandibles clicked once in surprise, then stilled. Diplomatic immunity, I told myself. Cultural misunderstanding. Any excuse to keep my legs moving. I reached the open circle at the foot of the dais and dropped to one knee beside her, awkward, loud, human. My dress shoe scraped against crystal with a sound like breaking bone. Reall did not look up. I swallowed once, twice. My pulse thundered in my ears. Your Radiance, I said, voice low but clear enough to carry to the nearest ranks. I am Elias Marrow, cultural liaison of the Terran Concordance. I came here believing this was your coronation. I prepared words of congratulations. I wore my best uniform. I smiled in the antechamber because I thought joy was coming. A faint tremor ran through the nearest honor guard. Nothing more. I pressed on, words tumbling now, raw and unpolished. I was wrong. This is not triumph. This is loss. And I am so deeply, achingly sorry for your mother, for the light that has gone out of your world, for the weight crashing onto your shoulders before you've even had time to breathe. I know what it feels like to stand at the edge of forever and realize no one else will say the terrible, necessary words aloud. So I will say them now, even if it breaks every protocol I was ever taught. I am sorry. I see your pain. And I grieve with you. Silence stretched thin enough to snap. Then Reall lifted her head slowly, as though the motion cost more strength than she possessed. Her 6 eyes found mine. Black mirrors reflecting my flushed face, my trembling hands, the single tear track I hadn't felt sliding down my cheek. For an endless heartbeat there was only that fractured gaze, reading me in ways no human could ever match. You offer sorrow? She asked. The words were so quiet they barely stirred the air between us. Aloud? Before witnesses? Yes. My voice cracked on the single syllable. Because someone has to. Because you shouldn't have to carry it entirely alone. A sound escaped her then, not a sob, but something close to one, a soft, crystalline shiver that ran from her mandibles to the tips of her lower arms. Her shoulders dipped once almost imperceptibly, then straightened again with visible effort. Around us the hall had gone from reverent to electrified. Thousands of compound eyes tracked the impossible tableau, a human kneeling beside their sovereign, speaking grief like it was a language they shared. Reall's upper right hand moved, hesitant, trembling, until it rested on my forearm. The chitin was cool, smooth, alive with the faintest tremor. In 300 cycles of recorded sovereignty, she whispered, no off-worlder has ever named our mourning. No one has ever dared make it real by speaking it. I covered her hand with mine. Warm skin against cool exoskeleton, and squeezed once, gently. Then let me be the first, I said. And if your council demands my recall tomorrow, or my expulsion, or worse, so be it. But right now you are not alone with this. Not entirely. Her eyes flickered, each lens shifting independently, cataloging my face, my tear, my steady grip. Then she drew a breath that rattled in her thorax, raw, unsteady, almost human. She rose. Not gracefully, not yet. But with a quiet, deliberate strength that made the air feel heavier. She did not release my hand. Instead, she turned to face the silent sea of her people. When she spoke, her voice, still soft, carried to every corner of the Veilspire like light through crystal. This human has spoken what we have all carried in silence. My mother is gone. I mourn her. Grief is not dishonor. It is the echo of love that refuses to fade. A ripple moved through the ranks, subtle, seismic. Mandibles tapped once in unison, then again. Not applause. Not lament. Acknowledgement. Permission. The sound of an entire species exhaling after centuries of holding its breath. Reall turned back to me. Walk with me to the interment vault, she said. Not an order. A plea wrapped in command. Stand beside me when they seal her away. Be the witness who remembers that sorrow was given voice here. I rose. The word came without hesitation.
I would be honored.
She kept my hand in hers as we stepped past the bier. Past the honor guard who now lowered their lances in formal salute. Past row after row of motionless veiled whose eyes followed us, not with anger, not with judgment, but with something new flickering behind the obsidian gleam.
Curiosity. Wonder.
And perhaps, just perhaps, the first fragile seed of a different kind of strength. Behind us the soft clicking continued, thousands of mandibles tapping in slow, steady rhythm.
A heartbeat. A beginning.
And somewhere in that vast, violet-lit hall, a lone human walked hand in hand with an alien empress, the only soul who had dared to mistake majesty for mourning, and in doing so, had given an entire species permission to feel. The crystal doors to the interment vault opened ahead of us, dark and waiting. We stepped through together. Neither of us looked back.